Lesson 107. Possession. Whenever you're learning a language, one of the most basic things you want to be able to express is that somebody has something. And soon, we're going to learn how to do that in Russian. We're going to use one of the noun cases to express that something belongs to someone or that something has something. So, in order to prepare for that, let's review how to show possession in English. Because when we see that kind of exercise in Russian, we want to be able to translate it correctly into English using, correct apostrophes, knowing where to put the apostrophe, and so on and so forth. So let's review how to express possession in English. When you boil it all down, really we have two ways to express possession. Of course, you could use a verb like have or has. Bob has a car. But what I'm talking about here is using an apostrophe to show possession or using the word of. With that kind of expression, we have two ways to show possession. You can use an apostrophe with the letter S, or you can use the word of. So we have a few examples here. Fred's car, the nation's flag, Arizona's capital. In each of those examples, something belongs to someone. So Fred's car, the car belongs to Fred. Fred has the car, he owns the car. The nation's flag, it's the flag of a certain nation. Arizona's capital, again, the capital belongs to the state of Arizona. It's the capital of that state. So there, we're using apostrophes along with the letter S to show possession. Now, you can also do the exact same thing with the word of. So we have a few example sentences, but you can also do the exact same thing with the word of. You can use the word of to show possession instead of using an apostrophe plus the letter S, as we saw in the examples above. And we have a few examples here: the peak of the mountain, the smell of garlic, the beginning of the show. So we have three examples with an apostrophe plus the letter S, and three examples with the word of. But really, we've only made those examples like that because they sound good in English. We could actually switch the method we use and use the other method and say the exact same thing. For example, Fred's car, we could say the car of Fred. It doesn't sound like very good English, but it means the exact same thing. We could say the flag of the nation instead of the nation's flag, and that sounds fine, and it means the same thing. The capital of Arizona, that sounds perfectly natural to say it just like that. Likewise, with the second set of examples, the peak of the mountain, instead we could say the mountain's peak, and that sounds perfectly natural. The second one, garlic's smell, it still makes perfect sense, probably not the way too many people would express that. It's also hard to pronounce. And lastly, the beginning of the show, you could say the show's beginning. You could say the show's beginning was the best part. So my point here is that showing possession with an apostrophe plus the letter S and showing possession with the word of, those two methods mean the exact same thing, and they're often just interchangeable. Sometimes one method just sounds better or more natural than the other, but really they both do the same thing, and they're largely just interchangeable. And again, the reason we're bringing all this up is because soon we're going to start working with this kind of sentence in Russian. And so we need to know what we're expressing in Russian and how to render it into English. So before we leave this lesson, let's review some basic apostrophe rules for English, because the apostrophe doesn't always go in the same place, depending on if the word is singular or plural. So let's take a look at these rules here. Rule number 1, to make a noun that does not end in S, possessive, just add an apostrophe and then the letter S. If we have the word Kate and we want to make Kate possess something, we just add an apostrophe and then the letter S. So we get Lauren always wants to borrow Kate's Russian book. Rule number 2, what happens if the noun that's possessing something ends with the letter S? So rule number 2, to make a singular noun that ends in S, possessive, add an apostrophe and an S. And that's the same as rule number 1. So the word class is a noun that ends with the letter S. So to make the class possessive, we add an apostrophe plus the letter S, and we get the class's favorite subject was Russian. Now there is a little bit of wiggle room here. Sometimes in print, you will see a noun that ends with the letter S made into a possessive by just adding an apostrophe after the word. And oftentimes you'll see this with proper nouns, like someone's name. Let's say you're reading something about the ancient Greek writer Aristophanes. Well, his name ends with the letter S. So sometimes in print, you'll see someone just put an apostrophe after the final S, and then they don't add an extra S. But really, the best way to do it is to go ahead and add an apostrophe and then add an additional S in situations like that. In fact, the Chicago Manual of Style actually has a note on that very thing. I'll read you a little quote here from the Chicago Manual of Style. This is from Chapter 7 in the 16th edition. It says, "Some writers and publishers prefer the system, formerly more common, of simply omitting the possessive S on all words ending in S." Okay, so that's the kind of word we're talking about here in Lesson 107. And they give a couple of examples. But then they say after that, though easy to apply and economical, such usage disregards pronunciation and is therefore not recommended by Chicago. Now, the Chicago Manual of Style is not a book that we're all obligated to follow. Nevertheless, it is authoritative, and I've noticed that in some of the latest books that I've read, they do follow that rule. Even if something ends with an S, they go ahead and add an apostrophe plus another S if they want to make it possessive. So, based on the recommendations of the Chicago Manual of Style and what I've seen in print, I would advise you to go ahead and add the apostrophe plus another S, even if the word ends with the letter S. For example, the word class. Finally, on to Rule 3. If the noun that is possessing something is plural, then you will add the apostrophe after the word, after the final S in the word. So imagine you have some books, and those books have covers. The covers belong to the books. The group of books is a plural entity. It's a plural group of books. Our example sentence here, due to increased interest in Russian, all the books' covers are starting to wear out. So in that particular case, we see the word books, it's plural and possessive, so we're just adding the apostrophe after the final S. So again, quick review. This lesson is just a quick reminder of how to express possession with an apostrophe, how to express possession with the word of, and some basic rules about how to use apostrophes in English. And this will help us as we translate our Russian exercises into English, because soon we're going to encounter Russian sentences that express possession.